Welcome. This is Stephen Zielke, and this is the first in a series of meditations/talks on hymns that have impacted the church. Each of the hymns featured will be ones that you probably already know. And at the end, I'll provide a performance that you can sing along with or just listen to the beautiful music. Today's hymn is the beloved Joyful, Joyful, We Adore You, written by Henry van Dyke and set to a harmonization of Beethoven's historical melody from his Ninth Symphony. Henry van Dyke, a guest preacher at Williams College, and while staying at Harry Garfield's house, the president of Williams College and the son of James Garfield, who was our 20th president of the United States, was so moved by the beauty and the grandeur of the Berkshire Mountains that he penned the words that we now know as the hymn, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore You. The next morning, he handed the words to Harry Garfield saying, "Here's a hymn for you. Your mountains were my inspiration. It must be sung to the music of Beethoven's Ode to Joy." Now, Henry van Dyke was born in Pennsylvania and earned a degree in 1877 from Princeton Theological Seminary, and 2 years later was ordained as a Presbyterian minister. Eventually, he went on to become a professor of English literature at Princeton, a position he remained at for 23 years. It was during that time as a professor that he penned these words that would become linked with Beethoven's immortal masterpiece. Beethoven completed his Ninth Symphony in 1824, and at age 54, he had already been losing his hearing for over 2 decades. His hearing impairment terrified and enraged Beethoven. To be cut off from the world of music for a person like Beethoven was unthinkable and horrifying. He was embarrassed. He was fearful. Nevertheless, Beethoven towered over his age, creating a musical and cultural shadow that would loom over generations of composers who followed him, intimidating them. But he also inspired countless folk, musicians and otherwise, including our very own Henry van Dyke, who was inspired by the Berkshire Mountains and that wonderful melody in the Beethoven's Ninth Symphony to create these words. Now, I can't imagine a more different character than our very good Reverend and Professor Henry van Dyke, a professor of English literature at Princeton University, than Ludwig van Beethoven. They did share the van, interestingly enough. Beethoven was angry, brash, exceedingly non-religious, a humanist of his time, unforgiving, unrelenting. His melody, now linked to this hymn, is a tune that is at one time fierce and relentless as Beethoven, and as joyful and exuberant as Friedrich Schiller's words that were set in the Ninth Symphony. Freude, schöne gute Funken, wir betreuten Feuer trunken. Joy, beautiful spark of divinity, of the gods, we enter, drunk with fire. Who knew that the tune that set the words drunk with fire would eventually hold the words of Henry van Dyke? The texts of Schiller and Henry van Dyke, despite being very different poems, with Schiller expressing the humanistic commonality of all humankind, they both speak to the joy of what it means to live on this planet. Henry van Dyke writes of the joyful nature of Christianity, and his son Tertius said that his father often referred to Christianity as an out-of-doors religion. Now, those of us in the Northwest, we can really relate to that. We see God in the Willamette River, in the Cascade Mountains with its thick and tall forests. We see God in the high plains of eastern Oregon and the rocky coasts of the Pacific. We see God in the bounty of our blueberry bushes, in the rows of our filbert trees. We find God in the Oregon microbrews and the Willamette Valley wines. The out-of-doors God fills this hymn, and it's really easy to imagine Van Dyke being inspired by our own state to write these words. All your works with joy surround you. Earth and heaven reflect your rays. Stars and angels sing around you, center of unbroken praise. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing seas. Teach us how to love each other by the love our joy renew. Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing seas. Sounds like home. And then that fourth line in that verse, teach us how to love each other by the love our joy renew. Boy, we could use some teaching on how to love each other. But I would also like to mention the fourth verse. Now, musicians, we love to sing about music. You've heard this in choir at church. Half the time, our anthem is about singing. And it's kind of like, really? You're singing about yourself. Yes, it's a bit self-referential. And yes, perhaps we risk creating a God that is built to look like our own image. On the other hand, musicians who are religious will agree. We find God in the syncopation, in the crashing chords of harmony. We find God in the borrowed chord. We find God in the soaring melody. And we find God in the suspensions that bring both tension and release. So for us, it's the fourth force that rings true. Mortals join the mighty chorus, which the morning stars began. Ever singing, move we forward, faithful in the midst of strife. Joyful music, lead us onward in the triumph song of life. It's been a real pleasure bringing this hymn and this tune to you. I hope you found some greater understanding and that it's given a greater meaning to both your heart and your mind. I hope someday very soon to sing this song together as a congregation in our sanctuary. But until that time, enjoy this wonderful performance of the hymn by the choir of Jesus College at Cambridge University. Joyful, joyful.